Alright everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today I will be covering the new patch version 13.3. Came out a couple of days ago. I know a lot of people don't like reading patch notes, so we are going to cover everything here. So with this new update, we have a couple of new skins. We have a new Phase Panda Power skin, a new Chimera White Tiger skin, and we have some Drongo Alien Invader skin. And then lastly, we have a Howitzer Hardcase skin. From what I believe, all of these are older Paragon skins except the Drongo one. I don't ever remember seeing that one, and I'm not too sure about the Phase one either. Next up, we have some controller changes. So what they did was they made adjustments to the default controller layout by removing the recall to D-pad down, and then they also switched the spray to L3 instead of the D-pad down, and they also increased the time needed when holding R3 to bring up the team comms, along with reducing incorrect inputs when trying to ping. They also made some ability buffering changes, so the blink can no longer be buffered. The max buff duration before an input is forgotten is reduced by 50%, and for dashes, when they're buffered, they will take the currently held movement as input at the point of activating. The ability buffering system thing is still a little bit confusing, but it's nothing too crazy that anybody should worry about for the most part. Now for the big ones, we got a lot of hero changes and a lot of item changes with this patch, so we're going to be covering every single last one of these. So for Countess, all they did was they changed the bug fix. Apparently, I guess it was displaying incorrectly in the main menu, so it now states correct that she gets 1% magical lifesteal per stack, and that is for her passive ability. For Decker, this is more of a quality of life improvement. For her stasis bomb, they improved the responsiveness on cast. Feng Mao, apparently he struggles in the jungle early game. I'm not too sure. I've tried Feng Mao jungle only a few times. Basically buffed him, gave him a buff to his reaping dash damage, and they also buffed his hamstring damage. Now a late game Feng Mao is definitely going to be super strong with these buffs, because late game Feng Mao fully maxed out is super duper strong. Greystone, he's getting a big nerf to his Sacred Oath, and all they did was reduce the damage from, I guess, at max level all the way from 85 down to 76. So you won't get shredded by a Greystone jungle as quickly. You'll probably still get messed up by Greystone at the end of the day. Now Grux got a buff and a nerf at the same time. They really just buffed him for the jungle, and then what they also did was they nerfed him because his movement speed stacks that he would get from his passive was absurd. He was actually just running down people like crazy. Omnivamp can now be gained against monsters, which means just, you know, AI minions. They basically got rid of all of his movement stacks, so from 10% to 0. His bleed physical power scaling got increased from 10% to 15%, and they also changed the scaling from 0.1 to 0.15, and then also the tick scaling they changed from 0.02 to 0.03. So he got a buff and a nerf. Iggy and Scorch, they kind of buffed and nerfed him as well, so they increased the damage on the turrets, because that most certainly definitely was a problem, especially when you can really just one-shot his turrets with most abilities, or if you're an ADC you can kind of just get rid of it super fast. So they increased the flame damage on that, and then they also nerfed the Molotov a little bit, so they upped the cooldown. So at max level it went from 6.5 seconds to 7 seconds, so it got a little bit of a nerf, but nothing that will really affect it too much, especially if you put on time warp. And then they also buffed his ultimate, giving the super big damage buff in the very beginning. So at max level it went from 450 to 500, and then the healing and magical power scaling got buffed as well from 1.35 to 1.5. The Belch actually got nerfed from 225 at max level to 70 at max level, and then the Belch scaling also got decreased. So Kalari is getting a nerf to basically her ultimate. She was able to burst down a lot of characters really fast, so they're actually going to buff her crippling dagger from 140 to 160 at max level, but they're going to reduce her ultimate, which is guillotine, from 540 at max level to 500, and then the total healing bonus physical power scaling has got reduced as well, so that was a little bit of nerf. So at max level got 1.5 to 1.4 scaling. Next up we have Kira. So Kira honestly is one of the best carries in the game currently, so she got a big nerf to her late game damage. So for her bolt ability, that got a ginormous nerf, so 3.79 to 3.53, and then her Shadow Glide gives her bonus physical power, so they reduced that by 5. It went from 30 to 25 at max level at level 5. And then moving on to Morigesh. Morigesh just got a little bit of a buff, only because Megacosm got nerfed in the last update, so they're gonna give the Hive a little bit more scaling. Next up we have Muriel. So a Muriel could basically shield pretty dang well. I don't know how I really feel too much about this nerf though, but her concentrated ground ability, which I believe that is her circle, or I don't know what it is on PC, maybe the 2, the big old shield that pops pops up on the ground. That got a nerf, so at max level it went from 300 to 280. And then Reversal of Fortune, that might be the ult, I'm not too sure. Yeah, that's definitely the ult. So that shield got decreased from 900 at max level to 800. Now I don't really know how I feel too much about this, because like I was about to say, if you put on Demon's Edge, if your carry puts on Demon's Edge, Muriel isn't too big of a problem, but I see what they were trying to do. So moving on to Narbash. Narbash has been on top of the support role. Honestly, I think his win percent is literally the highest in the game, right? Like right next to Steel or Richter or something like that. But they nerfed his maximum mana from 420 to 400 at level 1. His March ability, the mana cost got reduced from 60 to 50. And then the Song of My People, which is the big heal that he has, got nerfed from 19 health per second to 15 at maximum level. Obviously this can get buffed with extra items, but the base got nerfed. Moving on to Phase, what they have here is some quick mana tuning for Phase to create some more chances to run dry should she miss and recklessly spam her abilities and heals for in lane. So what they did was they reduced her maximum health from 495 to 585 at level 1. And then they also nerfed her mana quite a bit, basically around about like 10. So the most mana that she gets for leveling up at maximum level, she got 56, and then that got nerfed down to 47. So it looks like around that like 8 to 10 range every single level that she gets that extra mana from leveling up. It got nerfed about around like 8 to 10 mana. And then what they also did was they reduced the range of her telekinetic link. So they reduced the casting range, and they also reduced the breaking range, so it breaks a little bit faster. So basically you got to stick by your phase. And then the psychic flare, they reduced the cost from 80 to 70. Now with Richter, he got a little bit of a nerf, not a big enough nerf to me. Honestly, I could go with them, you know, taking him out the game for a while along with the other two robots, but that's just my personal opinion. Anyway, they nerfed the scaling of his electrocute ability from 0.08 to 0.07, and also the tick damage. Well, it says it got nerfed from 0.00 to 0.00, so I don't know what the hell is going on with the update patch notes, but yeah, they just nerfed his electrocute ability just a little bit. They really need to nerf that movement speed on his ass though. Moving on to Sereth. Sereth, apparently she was just absolutely obliterating squishy targets, which she does, and mainly that's because of her invulnerability ability. So basically with her chastise ability, they actually gave that a buff. So from max level at 240, it got buffed to 260. Her Heaven's Fury, it got nerfed. The physical power scaling got nerfed from 45% to 40%, and the on hit modifier also got nerfed from 75% to 60%. And then the Heresy, which is her ult, got a little bit of a nerf. So the scaling, the burn scaling got nerfed from 0.3 to 0.25, and also the ticks from it got nerfed from 0.06 to 0.05. So moving on to Steel, honestly this is not a big enough nerf in my opinion. That robot fuck is so annoying to deal with. So what they did was they just reduced his health regen from 2 to 1.75 at level 1, which honestly ain't shit, but it is what it is, man. Twin Blast got a little bit of a nerf. So I guess people were farming with the vortex grenades so they could like really just be super safe. So what they did was they reduced the rocket dash cooldown, so I guess you could be able to spam the dash a little bit more. So it went from 12 seconds at max level to 10 seconds. Obviously that gets lowered with cooldown reduction. And then for the vortex grenade got nerfed from the physical power scaling being at 75% to 70%, and then the healing bonus physical power scaling got reduced from 0.75 to 0.7, and then the charge cooldown actually got nerfed from 5 seconds to 6 seconds at level 5, so it takes a little bit longer to get your grenade back. Moving on to Xerus. Xerus's ability to bully his foe repeatedly with the spear poking in the off lane can be an overbearing. So what they're going to do is they're going to change his mana pool so he can't be super duper reckless and just keep spamming the ability. So they nerfed the mana from 350 to 325 at level 1, and then they also reduced the base damage of the Spear of Nier from 175 at maximum level to 170. So that is it for the hero changes. So moving on to the item changes, there were a lot. Now this is a huge one. If you like to rock Eviscerator, this thing has low-key kind of been very good and then kind of not at the same time. If you could put it on, if they didn't have like good CC like a Richter or Countess or a Faye, somebody where you need to like cleanse their ultimate, you could go ahead and put on Eviscerate, but it had a 30-second cooldown, so it was really easy to do a shitload of damage. So they nerfed it to put it along the line with the other crest, so it went from 30 seconds to 90 seconds. Sanctification, which is the big old shield crest that supports get, they reduced the shield scaling from 0.12 to 0.1 because those shields were honestly ginormous. I'm not too sure how that's going to be big enough or not, but we're going to see how that nerf ends up being in game. So next up we have Horn Plate. So what they say here is that tier 2 blight items are all having their healing reduction effects DPS increased from 20% to 25% to make them better standalone choices against healing heavy comps should you need them. So the blight has been decreased from 0.8 to 0.75 on all of the tier 2 blight items. Dust Devil is getting a little bit of a nerf with the bonus movement speed that you get, so it got decreased from 1.18 to 1.15. Onyxian Quiver is getting a little bit of a DPS scaling from 0.12 to 0.13 on the side bullets, the side projectiles that it gets. Nightfall is getting a little bit of a buff in the healing department, so they increased the base healing from 0.05 to 0.06, and the enhanced ability healing got increased from 0.1 to 0.12. Painweaver is getting a little bit of a nerf from the bonus movement speed that you get from 1.03 to 1.02. Echelon Cloak is also getting a nerf from the camouflaged health regen, so it got nerfed from 0.02 to 0.01. Tainted Blade is getting a quick buff to compete with other fighter items, so you're getting a little bit of extra health if you decide to build Tainted Blade, so it got increased from 250 extra health to 300. Berserker's Axe is getting 10 ability haste added to it. The recipe is also getting changed, and because they're adding the ability haste, they're going to reduce the damage from 45 to 400 and the bonus health from 350 to 300. Citadel is a very good item, allowing people to be a little bit too tanky, especially like Xerases or Chimeras or whatever, so the armor is getting nerfed from 45 to 40, and the armor that you gain from the passive for every nearby enemy hero is getting decreased from 8 to 6. See, now this is where it's low-key about to get busted, because y'all already know Caustica is gonna be crazy now. So what they did was Caustica, the magic percent that you get was always 20%, so it's gonna be going from 20% to 40%. Now moving on to Magnify, the cost got decreased from 3150 to 3050, so it might be a little bit easier to pick up for a lot of people that like to go those, you know, attack speed magical builds like myself. Megacosm is getting a slight bit of a nerf because Morigesh was finding some trouble along with other mages to burn down like high health tanky targets as a magic build, so they're going to buff the disintegrate damage from 3% to 3.5% because it got nerfed from 4 to 3% in the last update, and then the burn has been increased from 1 to 1.6. Oathkeeper is getting a slight nerf, so the Spellblade AP scaling has been decreased from 0.6 to 0.5. Prophecy is getting a reduction cost to make it a little bit more accessible to those that want it, so it's getting decreased from 3,250 to 3,100, which is pretty good because Prophecy does cost a lot. Tainted Scepter is getting a bit of a nerf, so the passive Malice is getting a magical damage nerf per stack, so it's getting decreased from 5 to 4 per stack. Orb of Growth is getting a little bit of a rehaul, just a slight bit, so they're going to give it more upfront mana from 200 to 250, and then what they're going to do is going to give you less healing from 0.04 to 0.03. The upgraded version of Orb of Growth after you finish all the stacks is Orb of Enlightenment, so what they did was they decreased the Art of Fortitude health restore from 4% to 3%, which is another passive that it gets, and then the mana per level has been decreased from 20 to 15. Fire Blossom is finally going to get a little bit of a nerf in the sense of it's going to cost a little bit more because it is really easy to get and it's super fucking strong, especially in the early game, so it's not going to cost 2,700 anymore, it's going to cost 2,950, and the armor is going to get buffed from 40 to 45. Galaxy Groove is going to be cheaper, costing from 2,800 to 2,650, and the armor is going to get decreased on it from 40 to 35. Elefrost is going to get a little bit of a nerf from the passive health scaling. It's going to get decreased from 0.04 to 0.03. So Stonewall is apparently too effective at shutting down physical ability casters, even when bought on a non-tank. So they're going to reduce the upfront damage reduction, offering more scaling to ensure that it leans more towards tank users rather than being good on tanks and carries. So the physical damage ability reduction has been increased from 0.9 to 0.92, and the physical damage ability reduction scaling has been increased from 0.05 to 0.06. Unbroken Will is getting a bit of a rehaul, so Unbroken Will's healing when immobilized created far too many moments of non-interaction with heroes such as Grux and Steel, being entirely hard countered by its existence because they have a lot of CC, and you get healed if the enemy CCs you if you have Unbroken Will. So what they decided to do, they got rid of the persistent passive and they decided to add magic resist, increasing it from 35 to 40, and they decreased the tenacity from 0.85 0.5 to 0.8. Moving on to Void Helm. Void Helm is getting a little bit of a health nerf, so it's going from 450 to 425. Giant's Ring, the cost is getting increased from 3,000 to 3050, but the health is also getting decreased from 325 to 300. Frosted Lore is getting a quick shift in damage potential to make it do less damage, but more about shielding. So the health is getting decreased from 325 to 300. The passive damage has been increased from 40 to 60. Then the health scaling has got decreased from 0.07 to 0.05, and then the shielding percent got increased from 1.2 to 1.4. Near War Boots was a really good option, especially as of late, because of basically the shitload of health regen that you would get as long as you stayed in combat. So what they're going to do is they're going to get rid of the resistance part, which no longer persists until you leave combat. The resilience bonus movement speed got increased from 40% to 50%, and now the duration of resilience is also got increased from 4 seconds to 5 seconds. So the near war boost got a little bit of a nerf. Stormbreaker with the recent update had been really fucking strong, not gonna lie. It is a very good pick, so it's getting a bit of a nerf, just a slight bit of a nerf. So they reduced the power scaling from 40% to 35%. The chain zap damage got increased slightly from 20 to 25. The critical strike scaling got decreased from 80% to 0. Honestly, I didn't even know that the zap damage got buffed off of critical strikes, like if you had a crit chance, but apparently it did. And then they also reduced the max stacks from 200 to 150. Honestly, I don't think I've ever played a match where I even got all 200 stacks. I don't even know if that's even considered a nerf, but I guess so if you did get all of your stacks. Now, apparently we're going back to Caustica. So this goes back to Caustica's passive. Now it always gives 40% magical penetration. So it no longer falls off if you're below 50% mana. So Caustica is about to be a really good pick for all mages. And on top of that, it's now 40% magical penetration instead of like that 20% that you got before. Now for the final item, Tainted Scepter. So what they did was they removed the 10 magical penetration, added the 15 ability haste, changed the recipe up a little bit, reduced the malice damage from 75 to 60, and then the malice damage type from magical damage to true damage. Now I'm cool with this change just because I never liked the penetration that they gave Tainted Scepter back in the day. It did used to have that ability haste, and I thought it made it a nice little item to put on anyone. But ever since they got rid of the ability haste, I rarely put it on. But now that they changed it back, I might just use it on some of my builds now. So moving on to the last of the patch notes, they had a few jungle changes. So basically what they did here was with Fangtooth, they nerfed the health a little bit. So the health got decreased from 5,800 plus like 480 per level to 5,400 to 500 per level. And then the base armor got increased from 20 to 22. And then Orb Prime, so all this says here is that Orb Prime used to just like basically knock you up, especially when it got right into like the smiting range of the hunt, and then like enemies could go ahead and like steal it super quick because like everybody on your team is flying backwards and they could just come in and just smite it real quick. So all they're gonna do is change the way that Orb Prime calls out its abilities. And then what they're also gonna do is they're going to decrease the basic attack damage from 120 plus 8 per level to 110 plus 7 per level. Order of which the special attacks come out got changed from Slam, Missiles, Knockback to Missiles, Knockback, Slam. And then lastly, on the update notes, we have a couple of bug fixes here. You guys can take a look at it. So how I feel about this update, I'm not too sure. I mean, there's a couple of good changes, a couple of bad ones. We're just gonna have to wait and see what it turns out to be. I don't really care too much for hardly any of these changes. They're not gonna really affect the characters that I play too much. If anything, they're gonna fucking help, especially with the magical item changes. But other than that, I mean, there wasn't too many things that I really cared about. Let me know what you guys think about the new update down below. What don't you guys like about this patch? What do you guys like about the patch? Let me know down in the comment section below. But other than that, it's your boy Big Cat 188. I'll catch you guys in the next one, and I'm out. Peace.